PS5 Jailbreak update. So this one is a huge one because Gajina is clearly back in the scene again, releasing stuff in public, because we have a new release, which is in fact a kernel exploit for the PS5 that works up to firmware 12.70. This is different to the kernel exploits that Gajina already showed a preview of, the 0-day one that works on the latest firmwares on the PS4 and PS5. That's a separate kernel exploits that is likely being reported to Sony, so we may have to wait a while for that one to get released. But this is a brand new kernel exploit only for the PS5. It was patched in firmware 13.0, and therefore Gajina has decided to just release it because it's already been patched. And yeah, it is available here, as you can see. So this is more of a write-up on how to implement the exploit with a POC. So it's not yet been coded into a workable exploit that you can run on the PS5 yet, but that will come fairly soon. And of course, we'll be able to chain it with the existing userland exploits, and we should be able to chain it with pretty much all of the userland exploits that we have access to so far. So obviously, this is fantastic news, but there is one big downside, an elephant in the room here, and that is the fact that this jailbreak could take potentially hours to load. It does say it may be reducible with multiple threads, so perhaps if you could get multiple threads running, you could get this reduced down much lower, so it's not going to take a few hours, maybe a certain number of minutes instead. You know, in the best of cases, perhaps that could happen. We'll just have to see what happens once we get a full implementation of this, and see if the developers can work any magic to try and get that time down, so it doesn't take a few hours to jailbreak, because obviously that's not really practical for a jailbreak. I mean, I guess if it was your only option, you could use rest mode so you only have to jailbreak once and then try and keep your console on all the time and just use rest mode instead of turning the console off, then I guess that would be an option. But obviously it's not the most practical solution, so we'll just have to kind of keep our fingers crossed and see if there's anything that can be done to make it take less to actually jailbreak with this method. And then obviously if this 12.70 kernel exploit is able to be made into an exploit that can load in a more reasonable amount of time, then we could do things like obviously chain it with existing kernel exploits as well, like the Y2JB jailbreak, which works up to 12.40. So we could jailbreak up to 12.40 with the new kernel exploit, and also up to 12.70 using other userland exploits that work up to the latest firmwares, like the Japanese Lua games, Star Wars Racer Revenge, YARP, which is the Arcade Spirits, the new Challengers game, and any of the other ones, Don't Starve Together, Console Edition. They could all be changed with this kernel exploits to jailbreak up to 12.70. Just a truly incredible update. Obviously, we'll just have to wait for these things to get implemented so we can actually have a version of this that we can run on our consoles. So I'm just going to go through some of the other updates quickly over the past few days. So there was also this $10,000 bounty that was disclosed from Slidey Bat. This is actually the net control exploits, the poops kernel exploits that we already know about. So this is an older kernel exploit, nothing new. And then also another one of Gajina's reports was disclosed. This one is a Blu-ray exploit for the PS4, which works up to 13.02, just a userland exploit, not a kernel exploit. So we'll have to wait for a new kernel exploit for the PS4 to be able to jailbreak up to 13.02 using this Blu-ray exploit. And of course, the other big release was PS5 Linux, now available from the Flow. So the repo has been released here, PS5 Linux, so you can run this on PS5s on firmware 3.0 to 4.51 for now. 1.x and 2.x firmwares will likely get support in the future, and 5.x firmwares may also get added with KLD load, although the Flow notes that Linux will run within the GameOS virtual machine, so it will have less features on 5.x firmwares, and it might not perform as well as the firmwares that have the full hypervisor exploits, like 3.0 to 4.51. So really, if we want the best Linux experience for more PS5s, we really need a new hypervisor exploit that works on an even higher firmware so that more PS5s will be able to take advantage of Linux, because it really is an incredible experience to be able to effectively have a gaming PC and a PS5 in one. You have access to your PS5 library of games and your PS4 games on the PS5's operating system, and then you can boot into Linux and then run all of your favorite PC games. And it also fixes a lot of problems that we have with jailbroken consoles, like, well, if I have a jailbroken console, I can't play online games because I have to keep it offline. Well, you can boot into Linux and play PC games online, and you don't even have to pay for a PSN subscription to play those PC games online. Not only that, but you can also play games that are available on PS5 but require higher firmwares to run, games like Pragmata and Resident Evil Requiem that we can't run on jailbroken consoles because it requires a higher firmware for the PS5 version of the game to run. Well, you can just boot into Linux and then run the PC version of the game instead to still be able to enjoy those games, not to mention all of the PC games that are not available on the PS5 that you can play. I was able to run RPCS3 to play PS3 games, and they are playable on the PS5, as well as Xbox 360 games with Xenia, although that one wasn't quite as stable, but I would obviously have to do more testing. I only ran one game, and I did eventually get Nintendo Switch emulation working on it as well. To get Years of the Kingdom running, so Nintendo Switch games, PS3 games, Xbox 360 games, Wii U games with Cemu, Wii games with Dolphin, and of course you've got the PS2 emulators as well, so you can run games from all of these different systems on your PS5 through Linux, and you can even convert it into like a Steam machine, where you can just have it so that whenever you put into Linux to automatically open Steam in big picture mode, so you can just use your controller, you don't even need a keyboard or mouse, you can just use your controller to then select any PC games that you want to run from there, and then you can use Steam Big Picture mode to restart back into the PS5's operating system whenever you want to, so you can easily switch back and forth without even needing a keyboard or mouse once you have the distro fully configured. So obviously I've done a full deep dive tutorial on this, and I'll leave a link to it down in the video description. It's a pretty long video. It also goes over testing out some different games on the system as well. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. And last but not least, we have a new payload manager from PLK, and this payload loader comes with a new version of the YouTube Jailbreak autoloader as well. So you can install this by simply downloading the latest YouTube Jailbreak update file, the zip file. You copy it over to the root of a USB drive. If you open it up and go into the PS5 autoloader folder, you can see it just loads the new payload loader. So all you got to do is simply plug that USB drive into your PS5, load up the YouTube Jailbreak, and it will automatically update to the new version. Once that's done, we can then restart the console, and when we go to load the YouTube Jailbreak again, so instead of just showing the debug text, it now has this nice UI with a progress bar showing the progress of the jailbreak. And once it's done, it then loads the payload loader. And with the payload loader here, you can then simply go to the payload manager and download certain payloads. There's a repo available, so if your PS5 is connected to the internet, you have a bunch of popular payloads there on the repo, and you can just select whichever ones you want to install. Once you have them installed, you can run them directly from the dashboard. You just go to the dashboard, select your payload, and it will start running. So that way you have a payload selector whenever you load the jailbreak. And if you want to auto-load payloads when you run the jailbreak, you can do that as well. There's an auto-loader. You can enable that and then add certain payloads to the auto-loader and change their position on which payloads get loaded first. You have all of those options, and then that way when you load the jailbreak, it will auto-load those payloads, and it also creates its own shortcut on the home menu, so you can access the payload loader whenever you want when the payloader is running, and you can just access it again from there. So lots of improvements here, and this payload loader can be used with other things. It doesn't just have to be used with the YouTube Jailbreak. If you're using the Star Wars Racer Revenge game with the autoloader, or the Blu-ray exploit with the autoloader, you can have it load this payload and get the same experience. It's not just for YouTube Jailbreak, but YouTube Jailbreak is going to be getting a lot more use, it seems, with the recent announcements from Gajina. So that is fantastic to see that things are just getting better on all fronts here. So anyway, that's going to basically do it here for this video. Very, very exciting times. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always, I'll hopefully see you guys